Well, good morning, everyone. It's such an honor for me to be here today, and thank you, Mended Little Hearts, for inviting me to this very important symposium. I'm going to take a step back in time, before cell phones, before computers, before the advances in heart technology that we know today, and share with you my story of growing up in the 1950s with a severe congenital heart defect, how Children's Hospital Los Angeles, California allowed me a life, and how a young boy named Charlie Hoffman gave me the will to fight for it. My story actually begins in the year 1950, when as a young girl I was admitted to Children's Hospital Los Angeles for treatment of bacterial endocarditis, which is an inflammation of the lining of the heart. The treatment was penicillin in the form of shots, one every 4 hours, day and night, for as long as it would take to resolve the issue. And for me, that was 6 weeks. Now, after a while, the area where the shots were administered became red, swollen, and overcrowded, let's say, with needle marks. So the nurses had no choice but to give me shot on top of shot. This did not make me an extremely happy camper, but they were very good at what they did. They would take an ice cube, hold it over the area to numb it, and before I knew it, the shot was over. Now, when you're in the hospital for a certain period of time, you become very familiar with the sounds around you. For example, the medicine cart. Not a very happy sound. I was in a ward with 8 to 10 other patients, and whenever the medicine cart would turn into our room, I would cross all of my fingers and hope that the nurse might pass me by just one time, but that was seldom the case. But then there was the toy cart, and that was a happy sound. The toy cart was a brightly decorated cart pushed by a hospital volunteer, and it had toys and games and dolls and books and things that we could check out and keep with us on our beds or on our nightstands. And then she would come back the next day with new and different items, and that was always a highlight for me. But I must say my favorite sound was the sound of my mom's footsteps whenever she would come to visit. When I knew that visiting hours were near, I would start to listen, and from way down the hall, I could hear the sound of her heels. They just had a certain click to them, which told me that momentarily she would be turning into my room. My mom came twice a day, every day, by bus, and then when the announcement came over the loudspeaker that visiting hours were over, I would always start to cry. And you know, I think my mom cried too, but she would never let me see. Well, right after my bout with endocarditis, I had my first heart catheterization. The doctors felt more was going on with me, and they were right. The cardiologist performing the procedure confirmed the presence of a congenital heart defect known as tetralogy of Fallot. Now, I know some of you here today are familiar with that term, but for those who aren't, it meant that I had 4 defects in my heart. And briefly, those were a hole between the left and right pumping chambers or ventricles. The connection between my heart and my pulmonary artery was narrowed, therefore reducing blood flow to my lungs. My aorta was misplaced. In other words, it sat on top of both my left and right ventricles instead of just the left ventricle as in a normal heart, and my right ventricle was thickened as a result of working too hard to pump blood through my pulmonary valve. I had outward signs as well. My skin had a bluish tint, my lips and nails were blue, and I had frequent shortness of breath. I referred to these as my breathing spells. Whenever one of these would hit me, I would start to stumble, and the only relief I could get was to squat. It didn't matter where I was, out in public, taking a walk, at a friend's house. Whenever one of these spells hit me, down I went. So in 1952, I had my first heart surgery. My surgeons were Dr. John Jones and Dr. Bert Meyer of Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and together they attempted to resolve some of the issues in my heart, but found that they were unable to do all that they wanted. So they basically closed me up and told my parents, Cheryl requires a more advanced surgery. It's on the horizon, but it's not yet ready. So she will have to wait. so I began my wait. A few years after that, I had my second heart catheterization, which showed that my heart was in decline, but still, the surgery wasn't ready, and still, I had to wait. Now, in the meantime, I attended a school for the physically handicapped. The school was an hour from my home, and I was picked up every morning and brought home by a little yellow school bus that was specially equipped for handicapped children. My friends were kids with polio, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, other heart conditions. Our activities were very limited. We did have a wheelchair basketball team. We also had a handicapped Girl Scout troop, of which I was a very proud member. Our troop couldn't do the things other troops could do, but it was just enough for me to put on my green Girl Scout uniform and wear it to school for our meetings. And then, one day, a new boy came to school. We were in the 6th grade at the time. His name was Charlie Hoffman. Charlie had a heart condition as well, but it was different than mine. He had one large hole in his heart. Charlie and I shared the same dreams, the same goals, to get well, to do the things other kids could do, to go to regular school. As time went on, Charlie and I became even closer, and I guess you could say that we were boyfriend-girlfriend. We even had a favorite song, All Shook Up by Elvis Presley. And then one day Charlie came to school and he said, "I'm having my heart surgery." And I was so excited for him. Well, Charlie had his surgery. It was a success, and they were able to patch the hole in his heart. Now, while all of this was going on with Charlie, I had my 3rd heart catheterization. And it was after this that Dr. Jones requested a meeting with my parents. I have a big sister, Sandy, and she was a hospital volunteer at the time. She too was present at the meeting, and she has recounted it for me over the years. Dr. Jones told my parents that my heart was in rapid decline, that soon I would be disabled, confined to a wheelchair, and he did not expect me to live out the year. Therefore, Children's Hospital wanted to proceed with the surgery then, while I was still strong enough to have it. Well, he also went on to say that my chances for survival were frankly quite low, because they had already performed the procedure on a few before me and had negative outcomes. But he also went on to say that Children's Hospital was putting together a very special surgical team. They had reached out to another pediatric heart surgeon from a children's hospital in another state and asked him if he would be part of my surgical team. He was very well known in his field, and he agreed to do so. Dr. Jones went on to explain to my parents that he felt that with this special surgical team they were putting together, that my chances for having all of the defects or most of the defects corrected in my heart were very good. But again, my chances for survival were low. Then he went on to explain that this was known as open heart surgery, and they would be using a method known as deep hypothermia, which would very slowly lower my body core temperature to the point where they could safely stop my heart and then attach me to a fairly new device known as the mechanical heart-lung machine. Well, the heart-lung machine would oxygenate my blood and take over all of the functions of my heart while they worked on it. Well, now my parents had a decision to make, and I know that most of you here today have been faced with similar decisions. My mom was a flat-out no. Cheryl has been through too much. This is too risky. I don't want to lose her now. Let's just hold on to her for as long as we have her. But my dad, he was a resounding yes. This is Cheryl's chance for life. We have to give her this chance. It may not come again. What kind of life does she have now? So after further discussion, my surgery was scheduled. Now my dad was a very special person to me. He decided that he needed to give something back to the hospital, do something for my surgery. So he donated blood. But then he took it one step further. Being a battalion chief on the Los Angeles City Fire Department, he sent word out through the department asking if there was anyone who might be so inclined to donate blood on behalf of his daughter, who was about to undergo major heart surgery. Well, a few days after that, he had a call from the hospital administrator who said, "I just want you to know that we have a line of firefighters down one corridor and out the entrance to the hospital waiting to give blood." Well, my dad was so moved by this that he immediately went to the hospital and personally thanked every firefighter standing in line. And that was my dad. Now, as for me, I couldn't wait to tell Charlie that I would be having my heart surgery. But Charlie had been experiencing some problems, and it was determined that the patch over the hole in his heart had developed a leak, and he was going right back in the hospital for repair. But before he did, he gave me a gift, and it was a 45 RPM record of our song, "All Shook Up" by Elvis. And then Charlie called me from the hospital the night before his surgery, and we had a really nice talk, and he suddenly said to me, "You know, Cheryl, I'm not feeling right about this. Something is wrong. I can't put a finger on it necessarily, but I don't think I'm going to make it." Well, his comments just took me aback because Charlie had always been so positive. So I did my best to talk to him and get him back to being positive again. And then we said goodnight, and then the next day, Charlie died on the operating table. Well, as you can imagine, this was completely and utterly devastating for me. I didn't know what to do. First and foremost, I had just lost my best friend in the world. But secondly, my surgery was just 2 weeks away. And what would that mean for me? Even though Charlie had his surgery at a different hospital, would I have a patch over the hole in my heart? Would I have the same outcome as Charlie? Well, not only was I very heartbroken, but now very scared. Well, my parents went to Charlie's services and felt that it was best I not go. So I went into our backyard, cut some flowers from our garden, and I asked my mom to please put them at Charlie's resting place, which she did. And then that evening, I informed my parents that I would not be having my open heart surgery. Well, little did I know that this was not an elective situation. Well, my parents flew into an immediate panic, and they called Dr. Jones and they said, "What do we do?" And he said, "Okay, I understand what's going on here. What Cheryl needs is time. She needs time to understand what happened to Charlie and time to understand what her surgery can mean for her." So my surgery was postponed for another few weeks beyond the original date. And then I began to do a lot of thinking. I knew I was getting worse. I had to be pulled out of my handicapped school, and I had a home teacher. I was weaker. My breathing spells were becoming so frequent that my dad, who was not a large man, began to carry me on his back, piggyback, when we went places. Imagine a father carrying his young teenage daughter on his back. And then it hit me. I had to have this surgery, not just for me, but for my family, who had been through so much, and for Charlie, who had been so brave. What would Charlie think of me if I couldn't be as brave? So I remember going out into our living room. My dad was sitting in his favorite chair, and I simply said to him, "Dad, I'm ready." And on November 3rd, 1960, I had my open heart surgery. Surgery lasted approximately 6 hours, and when it was over, all of the surgeons came out to meet with my family, and they said Cheryl did very well, and we feel that we were able to correct most of the defects in her heart to allow her a normal life. However, we can offer no hope to you right now as to her survival. She has to be a fighter. The next 3 to 5 days are very critical. But my parents, they had their own glimmer of hope. because when they went to see me for the first time in ICU, what they saw beyond all the tubes and the machines and the mattress of ice that I had been placed on was the fact that my skin was no longer blue and my lips were pink. And that was their glimmer of hope. And then on the third day, a turning point. My parents were visiting with me in the ICU when my mom noticed that my coloring was off, my breathing seemed labored, so she had a nurse come in to take a look. And the nurse said, "You know, why don't you and your husband go back down to the waiting room and I'll have a doctor come in." Well, on their way back down the hallway, they saw a blue light starting to flash. They heard a buzzer go off, and before they knew it, doctors and nurses were running past them to my room. What happened next, I will never forget. A doctor bent down to my ear and he whispered, "Cheryl, I need to perform a procedure on you right now, and you're going to feel it, but it will be over very quickly." And with that, he cut an X in my side, inserted a drainage tube directly into my lungs, because you see, my lungs were filling with fluid and I was dying. Well, I never knew who the doctor was that saved my life that day, but an X still marks the spot. Well, shortly after that, my coloring came back, my breathing was easier, and for the first time, the doctors offered my parents hope. They said, "We believe Cheryl is going to make it. We believe Cheryl is going to survive breakthrough surgery." And I did. Just want to be sure the right slide was. Well, I was in the hospital for another 2 weeks until I finally got the nerve to ask the burning question that I had been so afraid to ask. Is there a patch over the hole in my heart? And my parents said no. They were able to resolve that a different way, and I was so relieved. My recovery began, and I could do things I never even dreamed of doing. I went back. I had a home teacher for a while longer. I went back to my handicapped school for a while, and then finally, for the first time in my life, I was able to attend a regular school as a junior in high school. Wow, talk about culture shock. A whole new world opened up on that one. I met new friends. I went to football dances. I went to other dances and football games. I even tried out for a high school drill team, and I made it. And I just want you to know that back then, being on your high school drill team was a seriously cool thing. And in my senior year, the ultimate honor for me, I, a girl who had grown up skinny, sickly, and blue, was elected to our high school homecoming court. Wow, wow, what a day that was for me. I can assure you that not only was my immediate family at that homecoming game, but aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole gamut. Well, I had 2 more minor surgeries during my teenage years, and the first was to resection my scar because it had healed with a keloid, and it was very, very unsightly. So I had that fixed. And then, not long after that, the wires that had been used to wire my ribs together during the surgery had begun to protrude ever so slightly under my skin. You could actually see the little bumps, and they were very painful to the touch. So I had those removed. Well, after high school, I went to college, I started a career, I got married, and then I had a most interesting experience. My first echocardiogram. Now, as most of you know, an echocardiogram is a test that displays images of your heart on a monitor. Well, the technician performing the test had never met an adult-corrected tetralogy before, so he was somewhat excited. As he was proceeding with the test, he was pointing certain things out to me, when all of a sudden he said, "Oh, look, I can see the outline of the patch over the hole in your heart." To which I said to him, "Oh no, I'm sorry. There's no patch in my heart." They were able to resolve that a different way. Well, not only did he show it to me, but he told me the brand and type of patch that was used. Well, as you can imagine, I was in a state of shock, and I couldn't get home fast enough that evening to call my mom. And our phone conversation went something like this. "Hey, Mom, I had a new heart test today, and guess what? There's a patch in my heart." Well, there was a brief silence on the other end of the line. And my mom said, "Well, yes, you do, Cheryl. And your dad and I knew that. But we made a decision so many years ago that if you ever asked that question, and you did, we would tell you no, because we knew that every time you felt the least bit ill or developed a fever, the first thought in your mind would be, oh no, my patch is leaking because of Charlie." And you know, my parents made the right decision, because I stand here before you today, 55 years after my open heart surgery, and I can assure you that that patch is there to stay. Well, life is good, and I am truly blessed. I have two beautiful daughters, Stacy and Courtney. When I became pregnant with Stacy, my cardiologist was very upset with me. He said, "What are you doing? We have never discussed pregnancy. I'm very concerned about this. I don't know how your heart will react." And I said to him, "You know, if I can water ski and I can snow ski, I can have this baby." It was so important to me personally. It was like coming full circle. Well, my pregnancy went great, and the only thing different between my labor and delivery, and perhaps some, was the fact that I was on oxygen the whole time. My cardiologist was there, and they delivered Stacy as quickly as they could. But I must tell you that when I held Stacy in my arms, my first question was, is her heart okay? And the doctors assured me, not only is her heart okay, but it's a very strong heart. And I must tell you that 43 years ago, today, it's still beating strong. Well, after that, my cardiologist said, "You know, Cheryl, I don't know if you want to be trying this again." So I listened, and some years later, through the miracle of adoption, we were blessed with our second daughter, Courtney. Well, not only do I have my beautiful daughters, but a wonderful son-in-law, 3 grandsons, and of course, my husband, Bart, who is my rock. You can't miss him. He's the one there with the video camera in the front row. Bart shares my same compassion for congenital heart disease. At Children's Hospital Los Angeles, we are heart ambassadors. We established a family endowment many years ago to which we contribute every year. Bart's company makes a contribution every year, and all of our funds are designated for the Heart Institute. We have been on tours of the Heart Institute. We have met young patients. I can never repay what was given to me, except to say to you that I, along with countless thousands of others, am living proof of the heart miracles performed across this country every day. And in closing, I would like to read a brief quote from a young heart warrior. His name is Max Page. Now, some of you may know Max through his parents, Jennifer and Buck, or through the fact that Max was that mini Darth Vader in the Volkswagen Super Bowl commercial that went viral a few years back. Max has tetralogy of Fallot, and whenever he meets kids that are facing scary issues, this is what he says, quote, "If you use your force and dream big, you can accomplish anything. We may be small, but we are mighty." Thank you so much.
Okay, before we open this up to questions, I have, if Diana could please go check on Dominic. He is fine. We just have a shoe issue. So please go get your little guy real quick. All right, we are going to open up. That was so wonderful. It's so wonderful to hear from adults.
Thank you.
To provide hope for all of our families.
We were just curious, who was the surgeon that they teamed with to come to do your surgery?
The surgeon who came from the other...
From the other state?
Yeah. Actually, I only know one of his names, which is Gordon, and I don't know if that's his first name or his last name. So I never knew who he was. Sorry, I can't answer that.
Any other questions? I need to have my running shoes on.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to you and your parents for being brave.
Thank
because
you.
Without people like you, we wouldn't have hope today.
Thank you so much. You know...
Any other questions?
I might make one comment, actually. Back in my day, they did not have counselors who would help families through dealing with issues like this. And I feel that the psychosocial impact is so important. And the things that are happening today with helping families cope with a condition like this is so important because, frankly, it caused some problems in my family. I have a brother who is just 3 years older than I, and he could never understand what was going through. And he felt that his childhood, it was impacted because of my sickness. And it was a burden that I've always carried with me. So I just want to say that today, with everything new happening in heart technology, the psychosocial part of it is so important for all of you. And please take advantage of that. Because if we had people that could talk to us during that time and help my family understand the impact of what was happening, I think things would have been different. And I want to add also that my mother never forgave my father for going against her wish. Even though I survived, even though I am here before you today, and I have had a great normal life, she still never forgave my father for going against her wishes. So all of these things are helped with counseling and those things that are provided today for you. So I feel that's very important to bring up. I'm also a member of the Adult Congenital Heart Association, which helps transition kids from their teenage years into adulthood. And I never knew about this organization until just recently, frankly. And I now see an adult congenital heart cardiologist who actually knows what tetralogy of Fallot is and can actually understand the things that I've gone through in my life. Okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.